This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta and the stacked cereals lineup for your wheat. Looking to drive a more profitable winter wheat crop? Now is the time to think fungicide protection. It starts at T1 timing with a strong leaf disease management fungicide like Miravis Neo. Learn more at syngenta.ca.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, April the 30th. On this episode of The Word, things are flying. Unbelievable progress. A few quick updates and then agronomy answers, and more answers. Lots of things to cover. Lots of questions coming in. That's the way I like it. And hopefully when we get through all that, Pete can get out the door and go do some of his own farming. Man, I am unbelievably slow. Let's go! Wow! Unbelievable wind on Tuesday in southwestern Ontario. If you looked at the wind maps, and someone posted it on Twitter, it was unbelievable. All of the wind just seemed to be coming and funneling right over southwestern Ontario to the point where there was wind taking trees down. The city of London had hydro go out. Unbelievable. The real downside from an agricultural standpoint, I was out in the field and there was so much dust blowing that it just looked hazy, as if it was foggy or misty, and it was just dust blowing. Dr. Dave put on Twitter some wind erosion in his area. We were in the field in some no-till or minimum till, I should say. It was RTS once. Corn stalks. The corn stalks, more of them were blowing than I would like, but much less dust. So the residue does make a difference. The crop canopy cover absolutely makes a difference. And wind erosion is one of those things we mostly don't think about much here in southwestern Ontario unless you're a sand farmer. But there was an unbelievable amount of soil moving. It reminded you of the dust bowls of the dirty 30s. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often. And yes, it's not as windy in southwestern Ontario all the time as it is in western Canada, particularly that Lethbridge area. But it was one dust bowl yesterday. There was no question about that. Meanwhile, the progress that we are making, we will have growers that are 100% complete, planting corn and soybeans, if you can imagine, in April. The first time ever for many growers that are in that situation. Not that there's that many of them, but the amount of progress that we have made. And you think back, we talked in the wintertime, we've got more ice cover on the lakes than we've had for a long time. That could slow things down. At the end of the day, none of that matters. It's all called, do we get dry weather in April? And what's really interesting about April, for much of the province, we had that one big rainstorm. Was it April 2nd, something like that? We got basically the full month's rainfall in that one rain event. Since then, it has been incredibly dry. In fact, it's been so dry that on the heavy clay soils in Lambton County and probably other places, the wheat is showing striping from the nitrogen application. Now, it's a really interesting study in how this happens, because on most of the better soils, we're not seeing that. In Lambton County, South Lambton County, only 0.4 of an inch of rain since that nitrogen was applied. And you'd say, well, 0.4 of an inch of rain should be enough to get that nitrogen into the soil where the plant roots can pick it up. And it probably is. The difference on a nice loam soil, the nitrogen goes in with that 0.4 of an inch of rain, and we get good water movement to the wheat plants because the pore size is right and the nitrogen goes with the water. On a clay soil, just by the inherent nature of the pore size, water movement is way slower. Root growth is less because it just struggles to get through that clay. It's nothing that as a grower, it's not that you've done anything wrong. It's just the inherent water movement within the soil. And so the nitrogen is in the soil, but the water isn't taking enough of it to the plant. And what's really interesting is with streamer nozzles, if you don't have a stream every 7 inches, if you're using a 3-hole streamer, my good friend Ryan Benjamin's sending me a picture of 3-hole streamers where they went across the wheat rows, and you can see the yellow-green strips from the 3-hole streamers, and that's because on a 3-hole streamer, if you're at 20 inches, you get a stream every 7 inches. But if you're at 30 inches, those outside 2 streams from every nozzle overlap. And now I get this stripping. And stripping in the wheat, we're seeing it with almost every streamer nozzle. It's a little worse with 3-hole nozzles that are not at the right boom height. At the end of the day, more nitrogen, more sulfur will not help. It's not that you've lost it. It's just that you need moisture, because as you get more moisture, you'll get more of that moisture moving the nitrogen to the plant. The nitrogen will move within the soil, and those strips will go away. But wow, it has been dry, and wow, we are flying ahead. Meanwhile, it's not dry everywhere because other areas, thunderstorms went through yesterday, and there were areas where they never stopped working, and there's areas where they got 4/10 or an inch or whatever rainfall, totally stopped things, and just that's the name of the game here in southwestern Ontario. It takes heat to get the clay soils to dry out. We did have unbelievable heat, and we'll talk about that in a minute here or two here, but the clay soils were just nicely getting fit and starting to go. The loams are flying ahead, unless you happen to be in the rain zone, in which case you've got very little done, and that's just the way that it works. Hey, here's a cool thing from Nature Nut Nick. So Nick is in the YEN program, the Yield Enhancement Network on wheat, and he's been in it from day one, and so he now has his YEN plot back in the same spot he had his first YEN plot. So 3 years apart, soil sampled roughly the same spots, and thankfully the soil tests came back almost exactly the same 3 years later. And that's the way it should work, and it gives you some added faith in soil testing. I know that you can get into variability or variations, and there's lots of reasons for that. But it is amazing to me when you think through the process of how much soil is in an acre, how much variability is in that soil from past manure applications, just from inherent soil variability. Man, the soil test, even though we just take this cupful of soil and we send it to the lab and they only sample a teaspoonful or a half a teaspoonful, soil testing works. All right. Yes, it's been warm, and that's been awesome in terms of warming the soil up. Although soils have stayed fairly cool, nighttime temperatures have dropped. There is corn that has been planted for 10 days and has not yet emerged, but we have had lots of warmth. It's been a warm trend across April, across southwestern Ontario, and actually across the whole eastern seaboard. The downside of that is that the insects move fast when we get those warm soil temperatures as well. And so in Ohio, alfalfa weevil is now active in virtually the entire state of Ohio. And if it's in Ohio and we move up into Ontario, it's going to be here very shortly. So that's one of the things we're going to have to start scouting for. You look at the size of the alfalfa and you say, wow. Remember, with alfalfa weevil, when the alfalfa is small, it can tolerate far less feeding damage than when it is big. So we will have to get out there and scout. Fortunately, in Ohio, those alfalfa weevil numbers have not been over threshold yet. But remember, like the variability in alfalfa weevil field to field is incredible. What's more concerning is black cutworm and armyworm, both in northwest Ohio. So think about northwest Ohio. That's right across the river or the lake from Essex County. They have been finding quite high moth catches for both black cutworm and armyworm. And one of the things I've really noticed is that we have so much purple dead nettle this year, and purple dead nettle, that is a perfect place for black cutworm moths to lay their eggs. So if you have purple dead nettle out there, you're going to plant corn, you are going to have to watch out for black cutworms. Scout, scout, scout. It's just, a chickweed is another weed. If you have that green material growing in the field, if you have a rye cover crop growing in the field, black cutworm is attracted there. And armyworm numbers are also very high in that northwest corner of Ohio. And armyworm, if you think about it, remember, armyworm really likes good wheat fields and good rye fields, the cereal crops. So we are going to have to stay on our toes scouting, because for both cutworm and armyworm, the moth catches are over the threshold where they think there could be a problem. All right, let's move on. Crop Protection Hub. If you're looking for rain-fast data, you can now find that if you just click on details of any of the herbicides you're going to apply and scroll down, you will find the rain-fast. So if you're worried about, I'm going to spray Infinity today on my winter wheat and the rain is coming, how long do I have before that rain comes? Rain-fast information is there, so a shout out to Mike Kober for getting that data there. It's really easy to find and really quite important, and will save quite a few calls to your local crop consultant, let me tell you that. All right, another one I just want to mention, because you know that I am the poster child for MAP on winter wheat. Oh my gosh. So we'll put in the post this picture of where the drill ran out of MAP. And for years, I have said that MAP helps with winter survival. It helps with fall growth. It helps with many things. But it's really hard from a research perspective to prove that MAP helps with winter survival. You can see where they ran out of MAP, the difference in how much that makes on winter survival. John, by the way, sending me some pictures as well. John, by listening to Wheat Pete and discussing with Wheat Pete last fall, he broke down and he bought himself a drill that had fertilizer capability. And you do that. You got to do some tests. And he sent me the pictures. And yeah, you add a band of MAP with your wheat seed, you just get another tiller. It's just healthier wheat. We talked about that lots, but it's just one of those things. I don't know why I still get questions. Just go do it. Hey, last week I talked about variable rate nitrogen and the fact that Dan Carlson out of Minnesota said that yield was not a good enough proxy to predict variable rate nitrogen rates. Boy, I got an email from Dave. I got a text from my good friend Paul Sullivan out in the Ottawa Valley, and Paul saying, Peter, saying things like that is setting Ontario agriculture back years. And I'm going, wow, Paul is a little harsh. I'm not into setting Ontario agriculture back. But it really is about using more than yield and more layers. And if you use the right layers, both Dave and Paul are convinced that they can make variable rate nitrogen on corn work. Fair enough. It's a really kind of moving target, but I'm not going to talk about it more here other than to say Lindsay and I did a nice segment on variable rate nitrogen on corn on the radio report on Agronomy Monday on Sirius Satellite Radio on Monday. And we will link it in the post. So if you want to listen more there, you can just click on that and go to that particular part of the post. All right, water hemp. Just real quickly, a reminder from the Ag Breakfast meetings from Ridgetown that if you have water hemp and it's resistant, cross-resistant, which much of the water hemp is, soil-applied Group 27 herbicides are the only thing that give you control. And post-emergent Group 27 herbicides are not giving control. So if you have that water hemp, and we've talked lots about the value of pre-emergent herbicides, you just have to do it. But don't forget that with water hemp, that soil-applied Group 27 becomes absolutely essential. Jerry saying, Peter, we were like all this shortage of ammonium thiosulfate over the last week. Growers that went out and they put their nitrogen on because they needed nitrogen on their wheat crop. They didn't get the sulfur on because there was no ammonium thiosulfate. It just wasn't here. We knew the supply was going to be tight. The demand was early. We just didn't have it in place. Can we use that ammonium thiosulfate with our fungicide application at T2 timing or at T3 timing? And Jerry, the answer is no. Oh my gosh. Mike Cobra did some excellent work. I think Peter Sycamore was involved in it as well. You use ammonium thiosulfate in with your whatever, fungicide, herbicide on winter wheat, and you will get incredible burn. And you can... And the data that Mike did, they did it early with the herbicide, so now or even earlier than our current wheat stage, and they saw significant burn. It didn't always mean yield loss, but significant burn. Ammonium thiosulfate burns like crazy. You put it with a fungicide at T2 or T3 timing, well, the fungicide might as well not go on because you're going to get so much burn that you just won't get efficacy out of the fungicide. And my other comment, remember, wheat needs sulfur early. If you wait till later, then if it's going to go sulfur deficient, it will already be sulfur deficient. So no, no, and no. Eric out of New Brunswick saying, Peter, I'm growing wheat, I'm growing rye. We put 70 pounds of nitrogen on it early. I'm going to come back with another 50 pounds of nitrogen on the wheat crop. Can I put it on the rye crop, or will I cause lodging? And you know, Eric, it depends on, is it hybrid rye or is it just common rye? Because common rye is incredibly lodging prone. The 70 pounds of nitrogen might make it lodge. For goodness sakes, don't add another 50. If it's hybrid rye, that's a different story. Hybrid rye probably stands another 50 and adds more yield. It's just a totally different beast. So I need to know that before I can tell you which way to go. Thomas from Cornwall saying, Peter, so I want to put the nitrogen and sulfur on my hay crop, but there's 35 millimeters of rain in the forecast tomorrow, and all the 4R strategies would say that's too much rain. We can't apply. Thomas, on hay, on established hay, the chances of 28% dribbled on the soil surface moving significantly off is really quite minimal. And the hay crop needs that nitrogen and sulfur immediately. So it's great that we're all thinking about the 4R strategies because they're incredibly important, but they always need to be put in context. On a hay crop, that's not too much rain. It's not 75 millimeters or 100 millimeters of rain, and just get that nitrogen on. It needs to go on. Brian at Stainer saying, Peter, when I counted my wheat stems, we've got 140 stems in 19.2 inches of row. So that's 7.5 inch rows, and that's 1 square foot. Oh, Brian, that is one heck of a lot of stems. I highly doubt every one of those stems will make a head. And so you might want to count stems that only have at least 2 good leaves and even 3 leaves to know that it's going to make a head. But regardless, it's that thick. That's called, you need a plant growth regulator. So in much of southwestern Ontario, we are at the stage right now. So add that in and get that on immediately. Dave asking a great question. So Peter, planting corn, man, the magnesium and potash in the starter band, and my rate gets so high, I worry about salt injury, but it really hurts my planter efficiency. Could I not just broadcast the magnesium and potash and only put the MAP in the 2x2 band or the MES in the 2x2 band to get some zinc there as well? And wouldn't that work? And the answer, Dave, really is, as long as your potash levels are over 100, then the broadcast potash is 100% fine. The broadcast magnesium should be fine. We always get better efficacy when we put that fertilizer in the band, there's no doubt. And we know how important potash is to a corn plant. If you are sub 100 parts per million on your soil test, I get some potash in there. It doesn't take much. 30 pounds actual is lots. In fact, at Elora, with a soil test potash of 50, that's right, 50, unbelievably deficient. Even 5 gallons of a 624-6, so that was 4 pounds of potash added, if I recall correctly, and memory's weak, so be careful with this, but I think it was 18 or 20 bushel per acre yield gain. If you added 30 pounds of potash in a 2x2 band, we gained 30 bushels per acre, rather. Just incredible potash response if you need that potash so that you don't go deficient. Going to move on. Gene from Manitoba saying, Peter, we're going to plant spring wheat into a 4-year-old alfalfa stand. We have to kill the alfalfa this spring. We're going to spray it with glyphosate and wait a week to plant. what else do we do? Because we need to get control of that alfalfa. So it's pretty simple, Gene. You're right on with spraying the glyphosate at 2 liters or the equivalent of 2 liters, so 1.33 liters per acre of the 540. But add 2,4-D ester, because 2,4-D ester is really good on alfalfa. The alfalfa is going to be aggressive and tough to kill. Wait the week to plant. You should get much better control out of versus the straight glyphosate, because the 2,4-D will help make the alfalfa grow itself to death. And right now, everything's coming out of the root into the plant, and getting the glyphosate down into the root to kill everything will be a little bit of a struggle. Okay, 2 things left and no time to do it. One was lots of calls about, can I spray my wheat? Today, Wednesday, it went down to 0 or 1 or 2 Celsius last night, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Can I spray my wheat on Wednesday? The nighttime temperatures tonight, Wednesday night, are going to be, let's say, 5 degrees Celsius, and it's going to rain tomorrow. So realistically, one of the things that worries me about that is we went from 29 degrees to 1 degree. Tuesday was 29 Celsius, 1 degree overnight. If that 1 degree shock means that the wheat crop isn't metabolizing things on Wednesday, and you spray a plant growth regulator or a herbicide on that wheat, it needs to metabolize that. It needs to be able to deal with that. It's a bit of a struggle, but if it's only 1, if you only have the herbicide in, I think it's fine. The rule of 3 is when we have 3 products in the tank, and realistically, it's the temperatures after application that make more difference than the temperature before. The only reason we worry about that low nighttime temperature before application is if it shocks the plant enough that it doesn't metabolize the next day. And that, with one nighttime temperature of 1 degree, drive on, just 3 products in the tank, I'm going to be a lot more reluctant, because we may get a hormone imbalance in the plant that it just can't deal with. But 1 product, I think you drive on. The other is cold water imbibition. So there was some chatter out in the countryside that you should stop planting on Monday because Tuesday night was going to go down to a low temperature of 1 or 0, and there was rain. Whoa, stop. Cold water imbibition is only a problem when you get cold rain. When it rained on Tuesday, it was 29 degrees. The rain was warm. It goes to 1 degree that night. Who cares? The soil's warm. The beans, the corn, they're imbibing warm water. It takes quite a while to drive that 1 degree Celsius temperature down to where the corn seed is imbibing moisture. Plus, it only dropped overnight, and then it's back up to 13 or something like that in the sunshine today on Wednesday. Cold water imbibition is real on both corn and soybeans, but understand that in order to cause a problem, it takes a cold rain. It's Wednesday today. They're talking rain, 80% chance of, an inch of rain on Thursday. If that rain was coming and it was 5 degrees Celsius when it rained, you should probably stop planting 24 hours before the rain happens. But in this case, that rain is coming when it's 13 degrees Celsius. Keep planting right up until it starts to rain you out of the field. It's all about rainfall and temperature of the rainfall that drives cold water imbibition. Air temperature really doesn't seem to drive it at all. And I'm way over time. I got to stop there, but lots of discussion about that. And with that, that's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, end of April 30th. Man, keep the questions coming. Keep planting when you can. And we will talk to you next week. Good luck. See you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta and the Stacked Cereals lineup. Growing winter wheat? Protect your yield with Miravis Neo fungicide with its long-lasting, powerful curative and preventative leaf disease management. Deal your wheat a winning hand with Miravis Neo for septorial leaf blotch, tan spot, and more. Talk to your retailer or visit syngenta.ca.